And wouldn't you know it, just at that exact time. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Stan?
I'm doing great, man. I need to change that alarm that goes off at 4 o'clock on my phone to tell me what time it is, though.
Well, you have the technology for that.
I do. It's interesting here, Josh.
Yes.
Yes, we are live.
What is interesting?
Yeah, it actually said that we had an issue with it, but the only issue that I can see, like I said, is usually me. So that's what the issue was. Hey, Ron, and Ron Snaberger's out there, so he can tell us if you know if he can
If you
hear
can
us.
hear me this week?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's actually a really good segue into the fact that I was testing that just then to see whether or not the live button actually worked, and to see when it worked, it didn't show that it went live, and so I pressed the manual button because I got so much patience, like we talked about before we went live. I gave it a full second to actually change that screen to show that it was live. When I hit the manual button, it said that it was not. I'm a little low. Josh says I'm a little low, but I don't know what I can do about that right now. Maybe, well, I guess I can do this. Anyway, when it went live, I gave it a second and didn't do anything, so I pushed that button, which means that how could I become operationally irrelevant in that scenario? Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about becoming operationally irrelevant in your business.
Yeah, but the truth is you can't be operationally irrelevant in that scenario because you got to have people who you can be operationally irrelevant with, meaning you need to have employees.
Yeah, yeah, that would handle that stuff. You mean?
Well, they might handle that stuff or handle whatever you don't want them to do. I mean, the truth is you're not going to be, if you have a company with 0 to 10 employees, and probably 0 to 25 employees, you're never going to be operationally relevant because the business isn't going to run unless you do stuff. So once you build a business to say 25, 30 employees, then you can think about that stuff. But if you got 5 employees, you're not going to be operationally relevant.
Okay, because I was confused there for a minute because I thought we were going to be talking about being operationally irrelevant, which we are.
We
What you're
are, but
saying
you
is you
have
got
to
to have a
have
certain amount of employees to do that.
the right type of company to be operationally relevant. I mean, if I'm a lawyer and I have a solo practice and all my money is because of me practicing law, I'm never going to become operationally irrelevant. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you're not going to build a business that's going to be sustainable, which means it lasts past you.
Huh.
You're looking confused.
Well, I'm not that confused, but I'm just trying to figure out what I wanted to do was have a business that just had me in it, and I want
Yeah,
to be operationally irrelevant.
not possible.
You mean I'm stuck in that rut? Is
You're
exactly
stuck.
what?
Well, you're stuck being operationally relevant.
All right. So then, in your particular business, then you can't do that. Is that right?
No, I am not building this business to become operationally irrelevant.
You did your other business though.
My other business had 90 employees.
Mm.
So my food service company had 90 employees. I was operationally irrelevant in my business by the 5th year.
Hmm. Was that what your goal was when you first started? Did you already know that's what you
I
wanted
I
to do?
didn't actually think about it till I didn't even know what operational relevance was until I've been in business for probably 10 years.
Hmm.
But the truth was I did it by mistake. And you can't grow a business to a relatively significant size. And 90 employees, by the way, I don't consider a really significant size business. It has a lot of people running around. But unless people can actually do the day-to-day work of the business, you're not going to be operationally irrelevant. And you have to have employees for that.
Well, what is it? What does that mean? What is operationally?
Operationally irrelevant means you're out of the day-to-day operations of your business. You're strategically involved. You're not tactically involved. So operations is a tactical activity in a business. For example, if you are the main salesperson for your company, you are operationally relevant when it comes to sales. If you are, like I had a client whose son is now moving into taking over the business, and he was out there doing installations for the stuff they did. And I have been harping in this business. Said, if you want your son to take over the business, you got to get him out of the field, period. There is no conversation about this because you can't have a guy working in the field and running a company with 40 people doing $6 million. It's not going to happen. So if you want to, if a business wants to grow, if you want to grow your business, you have to get out of the way of the business so it can grow. It sort of is this, you've heard the term, don't work in your business, work on your business. Mm-hmm. Well, most business owners can spend about 5% of their time working on their business and 95% of the time they're working in their business. And when you're working in your business, you are operationally relevant. When you're working on your business, you're operationally irrelevant.
So the whole key is to get, what's the first step?
The first step is to learn how to delegate. And that's the step that most business owners never get past. Mm-hmm. And there's two reasons they never get past it. One is they never really learn to trust the people that work for them. And what they don't trust them about is they don't trust them not to make mistakes. And the truth is, that's the second reason that people don't become operationally irrelevant, is they don't create a culture of mistakes. Not that mistakes are good things, but they're going to happen. And if you don't have a methodology for learning from mistakes and helping your people learn from mistakes, you're never going to actually delegate real responsibility. Because, and what happens a lot, there's an awful lot of business people I've talked with over the years. It's okay for them to make mistakes, but it's not okay for their staff to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. So as a result, what happens is, I'm saying that a lot as a result. So what happens is they never become operationally irrelevant, and often they become the bottleneck in the company because everything flows through them.
Yeah, I can say that I have been on both ends of that, and I know I understand what you're saying because I've been on both ends on that, where there wasn't enough trust put in me, and then I've been in a position where I didn't put enough trust in somebody else to do that business. But there's another part of that, though, is that there's a trust that goes with the clients, because when the clients are, and I would say, well, first of all, I guess the way to start that off is, are customers always right?
Well, I have a belief around this. Yeah, I have a whole thing on that. Customers are always right, and if the customer is wrong, they're going to become a next customer.
Well, okay.
So I mean, if you're okay with the customer going away, then the customer doesn't have to always be right. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have a conversation with your customers occasionally about setting appropriate expectations.
Mm-hmm. So do you do that? Do you talk with your customers about appropriate expectations? I mean,
yeah, actually, it's part. Yeah, I have a thing before somebody hires me, and this is really for the one-on-one coaching I do, not for a group program that I might have. But in a one-on-one program, I have a thing called the alignment conversation. And one of the pieces of the alignment conversation is, what are my expectations and what are your expectations? And some of my expectations are as idiotic as, how fast will you answer my emails? Mm-hmm. I've had clients work with me who I send them an email and it's like it goes into, a black hole, and I don't hear from them for 2 weeks, and then they respond. And if I'm going to help you on an in-depth basis, you need to be responding with my emails within 24 hours, unless there's a good reason that you're not. Like you might be on vacation, which, maybe you should tell me that. But if you're going to work with me, I have expectations of how you have to act, and you have expectations of how I should have to act. And I want to know what your expectations are, and you need to know what mine are.
Yeah. So that's some of that. I heard a lot of that in the question or about, like, when we were talking, and we talked about weekends. You know, we respond on the weekends. I mean, I most of the time respond on the weekends, but you can't count on it. But
Right.
But Monday, so that's an okay alignment then, right? That's not.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't expect people to get back to me on the weekends, but I would expect that if I send you an email during the week and you're not on vacation, that you would respond within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that goes. The reason I ask that is because some of that, when it becomes to a distrust in that person, because that's what we were talking about. We were talking about the idea that to become irrelevant, you have to delegate, and sometimes that, being on both sides, where things aren't delegated to you properly, or you don't delegate them to others properly, and the boss doesn't give you credit or trust that your judgment, that he can do something wrong but you can't. So the reason I ask that is because sometimes you have customers who are wrong and are just beating your employee to death over stuff. I mean,
that's another one of my rules, is that if you don't treat my employees with respect, you're not going to be a customer of ours.
Mm-hmm. And you do pretty well with this. I mean, I know I've known you. What have we known each other? 5 years, 7 years, something like that.
Probably closer to 7, I would think.
And I know that you do good, well in your business, so it must be something that you practice, and that you implement, is saying, I'm just going to be a customer.
Yeah, one of my core values is rights and respect.
That's right. That's that's one of the 5.
So, well, it's one of the 5, and it's not your core value necessarily. It's my core value. Mm-hmm. And rights and respect, what does that mean? Well, if you don't treat my people with respect, you're not going to be working with my company. Mm-hmm. If you don't treat each other in the company with respect, you're not going to be there for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. We talked about values last week, and this is a good example, by the way, of how values are used on a day-to-day basis. It's why I put values as the first thing I do when I work with somebody. But moving back to operational relevance, there's a book called The Trusted Advisor by Charles Green. I never remember the other guy who wrote it. And in there, and if you just Google the trust formula, you're going to come up with this formula, which really helps you figure out where trust is falling apart. And it's reliability plus competence plus intimacy divided by self-interest. And intimacy is, do you care about me as a person, not do we want to get intimate? Mm-hmm. So if I'm reliable, which means I do what I say I'm going to do when I'm going to do it. If I'm competent at what I'm doing, meaning I know what I'm doing and I know how to do it, and I prove to you I do, and I care about you as a person, and I manage my own self-interest, there's a really good chance you're going to have a high level of trust in me.
You mean as a customer or just in general?
Just in general. Could be as a customer, could be as a boss, it could be as an employee. So if you're working for me and you tell me I want to do something, you keep saying, I had a partner at one time said, I want to do this. I want to do this. He never did anything. It was just, stuff like this coming out of his mouth. So I didn't have a high level of trust with him. I wasn't going to ask him to do anything important because I was convinced, I think rightfully, that he was going to fall down on the job. Now, if he was an employee of mine, we would have been having a conversation about saying, I want to, and not doing it, because that would get into another one of my values, which of course is personal responsibility. So you're seeing how these two things kind of work together?
Yeah, I too, but I was also thinking about, I see your question, Ryan. I'm going to ask him in a minute, but I was thinking about when you said that is that you said that you knew he was going to, fail, right?
No, I knew he wasn't going to follow through, so why bother?
Okay, so that's not that, but that's not the same thing as failing.
Well, if he was my employee, that would be a failure.
But since
But he wasn't my employee; he was a partner.
he was a
So
partner,
there's a difference between employees. You can tell employees if they don't do the job properly. You can say, "This is not a good place for you. You should go somewhere else."
yeah,
Partners, you can't easily do that with.
yeah. Well, what you said too, I mean, because there's a lot wrapped up into this. I can see why the consultation part of that takes a lot of time, which I don't think some people really understand that there is a really need for that to try to understand what is going on, in certain things. But because when you say that, you didn't think he was going to follow up, I think of the thing about the saying about people, become what you expect. So you expected him not to follow up, and then they do what you.
No, I actually originally expected him to follow up, but he proved to me over the years
that he wasn't going to.
that he wasn't going to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the other part of that was that the trust that was well, I can't even formulate that question because it's pretty hard to formulate the question I was thinking about concerning a partnership, because you're right that you can fire an employee, but you can't really fire a partner. But in some respects, you did that already mentally, right?
Well, I essentially decided that he'll go his way, I'll go my way. And I wasn't depending on him doing anything for my success or happiness, for that matter. If I actually thought about it, I would be annoyed. But I, frankly, after a year or two of this, the yap, 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 without having any action behind it, I said, well, I'm not going to expect anything because it's not going to happen.
Well, but so that falls into the thing about personal responsibility. Since you knew that it wasn't going to happen, then you couldn't necessarily be held responsible for what he was doing. So,
well, actually, there's one of our folks in our group has some really interesting comments about personal responsibility.
You're talking about Stefan.
Yeah, Stefan. Mm-hmm. And what Stefan is talking about is what I call super responsibility. Uh-huh. And super responsibility means you pretend you're responsible whether you are or not, which also is my default, because I'm not going to learn something if I'm not being responsible.
You're not going to learn something if you're not being responsible.
Right. If I'm not being responsible, it's pretty much impossible to learn something. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not going to be responsible, I'm not going to be a very good delegator, which means I'm not going to be able to get to be operationally irrelevant. So, the reason operational relevance is really important is if you ever want to sell your business to an outsider. Mm-hmm. Because if you are operationally relevant, the value of your business has significantly decreased. The amount of cash that you're going to get is going to be significantly, at closing is going to be decreased, because the success of the business sale is going to be based on whether you can be replaced.
That's a really tough one. That's a tough situation to get into, or position. That's not a situation. That's more of a position to get into, because becoming completely operationally irrelevant, that's more like that. When I think of that, I think of Richard Branson, right?
He's complete. He is so operationally irrelevant that he wouldn't know what an operational activity is if it hit him in the head.
Yeah.
In fact, anybody who runs a big company with over several hundred people, they can't be operationally relevant in the company. If they are, then they're not doing what they should be doing, which is managing the company.
Yeah, which brought up another thought, that as an employee in a company, you are always operationally irrelevant
As an employee,
as an employee.
well, it depends how big the company is and what level
Right.
you are.
Right. But if the company is like I would say there are very few people who work for Walmart who are operationally relevant.
And I would say most people that work for Walmart are operationally relevant.
Well, if there's something
If you're a cashier, you're operationally relevant just because the job you're doing is tactical.
yeah, but they can be replaced in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but you're still operationally relevant while you're there.
You're operationally relevant while you're there,
Yes.
but on a larger theme or scheme, they are not. Right?
No, I would say that if you're a cashier at Walmart, you're always operationally relevant.
But it's not the cashier that's operationally relevant as much as the position. I'm really trying to figure out how you work yourself through that thing, because I can see how the position of a cashier and the position of a
the position, you have to understand what role you're playing in your business.
Okay, so that goes into the roles values.
Right. Well, not roles. It's not values. It's the roles. There's 4 roles you can play in a business.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a player. You can be a coach. You can be a general manager. You can be an owner. Players do the job. Players are always operationally relevant. Now, you may have different people you can put into that role, but the role itself is operationally relevant. If you're a salesperson, you're a player. If you're a designer, you're a player. If you're a supervisor, you're a coach. If you,
Man, this conversation is. I'm going to ask you Ron's question, and then we're going to be wrapping it up, because there's a lot that we could talk about this for a long, long time.
Yeah, well, this is a hugely big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you can wrap your head around it, I know that if you can wrap your head around it, then you can see through the see through the issues that you have with delegation.
Yeah. By the way, if I talk to somebody who is a business owner with 25 people,
mm-hmm.
and I introduce them to the concept of operational relevance,
mm-hmm.
almost 100% of the time they say, "I want that."
Yeah.
Because what happens is, if you've been running a business for 25, 30, 35 years, there's a very good chance if you're doing day-to-day stuff, you're getting burned out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's some discussion about that. There are times when I think you and I can say that we're not really burnt out because we enjoy what we're doing. And
right. Well, you're working in a unique ability area. If you're working in a non-unique ability area, you're going to get burned out. For example, if you make me do bookkeeping, I'm going to get burned out pretty fast because I'm not.
No, that's not true. I'm not going to. You're going to hire somebody. You're not going to get burned out. You're just going to say, "I'm not going to hire somebody."
Well, I know how to do that. There's a lot of owners who don't.
Yeah. All right. So the name of the book, I'm going to ask you, Ron. I'm going to ask Ron's question. What he says is, he said you also need to hire people that might outgrow their position and move on because they are good at what they do.
Yeah, that's fine. In a small company, that happens all the time.
But and when you're moving into this scenario, that's not.
No. People will outgrow the position. Possibly the position outgrows the people. I mean, when I grew my business, the people I had in management positions with 20 employees weren't the same people I had in management positions at 50 employees or 100.
Well, mine and Ron's relationship is a lot like mine and your relationship. I'm really reluctant to ever admit that you might be right about anything, ever.
Oh, okay. Well.
The name of the book is Sustainable, a fable about creating a personally and economically sustainable business. And this is Josh Patrick, and he wrote that book. And I'm going to tell you something. It is a lot. It's a lot better than it looks.
Why, you don't like my Elevark?
No. Well, yeah, that's an Elevark. And just in case you don't know what that is, that's an Elevark. But it is a lot better than it looks. It's like whenever I say something like that, I think of you know what Mark Twain said about Rachmaninoff?
No.
He said that I think it was Rachmaninoff. He said that his music was a lot better than it sounds. I've always thought that was just a perfect expression to what's the word that you use for that as a benchmark or whatever. Anyway, I'm Stan Bush, and this is Josh Patrick, and this is Fridays at 4, and it's going to be approximately 25 minutes, unless I bore Josh to tears, or unless we just can't turn the mics off and run into a thing that where we're going to talk for a while. But today is one of those days where it's 4:25, and is there anything you want to close with, Josh?
No. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of operational relevance.
Yeah,
but I have to say, I will tell you that if you want to create a sustainable business, it is the most important piece you have to get right. So we'll leave it there. How's that?
Yeah, okay. Peace, love, and understanding, and we will see you down the road.
Sounds good.